Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Raza Rumi, and I am the Director of Park Center for Independent Media at Ithaca College. I'm really pleased that the Park Center for Independent Media could partner with the Flaherty seminar in New York City to co-host this international book launch of Flaherty Tales from a Film seminar, co-edited by Scott McDonald and Patricia Zimmerman with Julia Tulke. The Park Center for Independent Media is a center for the study of media outlets that create and distribute content outside the traditional corporate systems and news organizations. At the center, we engage media producers and students in a dialogue about independent outlets and individuals producing content on issues such as equity, social justice, and sustainability. I'm excited to note that there are many of our students are participating in this launch, and I'm sure they will engage with the readings this evening. Flaherty is a scholarly work on one of the historically crucial international organizations for independent media, one of the oldest in the world. The book is a collective polyphonic people's history of their experiences at the Flaherty seminar. It is not only a vital historical document, but an invaluable reference for researchers, scholars, and students of screen studies. This book is the much anticipated follow-up to Professor Scott and Patty's earlier book, The Flaherty Decades in the Cause of Independent Cinema. I'm excited to be introducing this event because Dr. Zimmerman is a dear friend and a colleague, and I've learned a lot from her outstanding work with Professor Scott. And I'm sure you will too, and particularly our students. This volume adds immense value to the subject, and I hope all of you attending this event would get the book sooner than later. Before we begin, we want to acknowledge that here in upstate New York, we occupy the stolen land of the Cayuga people and the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. We give honor to them. We recognize that indigenous and native peoples and their movements are alive today. We affirm our continued commitment to supporting indigenous resistance. We also recognize that we are in a settler colonial space and that we are occupying what is not ours. This statement serves as a way to honor the indigenous and native peoples who were displaced by genocide and that continue to fight to reclaim their lands and sacred places. May I further add that all readers who will be speaking tonight at this event are also speaking from the indigenous lands. Moderating this launch is Girish Shambhu. Girish is the editor of Film Quarterly's Quorum and the author of The New Cinephilia. And I will now turn it over to Girish. Thank you.
Thank you, Raza, and welcome everyone. It is such a pleasure to be moderating this event because this book, Flaherty, is not only incredibly important, but also, I have to say, it is such a delight to pick up and just randomly dip into and read in small dessert-sized bites. That's the kind of book it is. And as someone whose background is in writing on the internet, this is a gloriously bloggy book. Patty and Scott's previous book about the Flaherty seminar was kind of a scholar's history, but this book is given over to the people, to the huge diversity of people who have attended the seminar over many decades. And these people are from an astonishing variety of backgrounds. There are filmmakers here and curators, scholars, critics, industry folks, etc. There are about 100 short accounts here in this book from people who write of their own experiences. And to quote Patty and Scott, this is not a grand history, but a granular history of the Flaherty seminar. Just a word now about the format of this event that we're going to follow. We're first going to have 6 readers / speakers who are going to be reading excerpts from the book that they wrote. And then we're going to have a Q&A for about 20 minutes or so, where the audience will ask questions by kind of raising their Zoom hand and then coming on screen to ask the questions. And then after that, we're going to have a short informal after party for about like 15 or 20 minutes. So that's going to be the structure of the event. So without any further ado, let's begin with the short readings. So let's begin with Patty. Patricia Zimmerman is professor of screen studies and co-director of the Finger Lakes Environmental Film Festival, FLEF, at Ithaca College. She is the author of several books, and with Louis Messiah, she's co-programmer of the national touring exhibition, We Tell, 50 Years of Participatory Community Media. So over to you, Patty, to start us off.
Thank you, Girish, and thank you, Raza, and thank you everyone for coming. Get out your shovel. At my first breakfast at the 1980 Flaherty seminar at Wells College in central New York, I picked at overcooked scrambled eggs and burnt wheat toast. I had sat down at the only open seat at a table with two gray-haired gentlemen. Sheepishly, I introduced myself. One man offered he was George Stoney, who I knew as the community media and Challenge for Change legend. The other identified himself as Eric Barnow. I blurted out that I had just devoured his books on documentary and the history of broadcasting to prepare for my PhD qualifying exams at the University of Wisconsin. I bet you thought I was dead, he said. He was 72 at the time. I had received what was then called a grant in aid to attend the seminar programmed by John Stewart Katz, a documentary scholar at York University in Toronto. This Flaherty was the first film event I had ever attended on the East Coast. Madison friends insisted I was insane to go just 2 weeks before my exams. At the opening reception the night before, I'd gravitated to a huddle of 20-somethings like me. At that first breakfast, I froze. I was sitting at a table at 7:30 a.m. with two men who had changed documentary history. When they probed about my then in-progress dissertation on the history of amateur film, I blurted out that I felt overwhelmed by mountains of archival material. Eric smiled. He said, "Never be intimidated. Just get out your shovel and keep digging." In graduate school, I battled about documentary, then a very marginalized area in film studies. The abstractions of Bateson, Fanon, Foucault, Habermas, Marxism, psychoanalysis, and critical historiography drowned my soul and my clarity. That Flaherty redefined documentary, not as an academic argument, but as an international community, a seething cauldron of obsessed partisans. I watched American regional independent narrative cinema like Alambrista and Gal Jungen, observational documentaries such as Garlic is as Good as 10 Mothers and Nayai, The Story of a Kung Woman, jammed against archival works such as The War at Home and The Trials of Eldra Hiss. Experimental documentaries like DOA and Poto and Cabango jolted me. For the first time, I experienced how documentary programmed with experimental films could fire up new conceptual thinking. The French-Canadian film Mourir à Tué-Tête chronicled a rape with daring self-reflexivity, scraping away my feminist film theories. Afterwards, I crammed into a booth with Anne-Claire Poirier, the film's militant director, and 3 other young women. I was enthralled. I could not figure out if the seminar was radical, liberal, or conservative. I had never attended any media event so focused on long discussions and intense debates. The entanglements of observational, archival, expository, personal, ethnographic, and hybrid documentary with narrative films, experimental works, and animation electrified me. That Flaherty featured filmmakers from every genre anthropologists, art world types, broadcasters, cinematographers, commercial media industry workers, distributors, elderly cineasts, exhibitors, film scholars, graduate students, librarians, journalists, marketers, producers. Their combustions torched something inside me about the urgencies of independent media that I had not felt as a graduate student. Discussions and debates cascaded like ferocious waterfalls. I was jumbled up with awe, anger, anxieties, critique, disdain, engagement, fascination, frustration. I uttered one incoherent, overly theoretical, tortured statement. I strolled to one screening with visual anthropologist Jay Ruby. He knew exactly what he thought about every film. His sharp mind terrified me. Back then, I criticized Nanook of the North as racist and colonialist. After reading Jay's archivally researched reassessment of the film as a collaborative ethnographic work, I gutted this position. At lunch, I met Bill Sloan, the librarian for the Museum of Modern Art. He spoke so generously about the short experimental works. I sat in the theater with legendary film librarian Dee Marie Grieco. She whispered two revelations into my ear. First, Frances Flaherty, not Robert Flaherty, inaugurated the seminars. Film history had erased her. Second, Barbara was Willard Van Dyke's ex-wife. She too had been expunged from film history. I realized that Frances Flaherty had built a place where young people like me could talk to legends like Eric and George, Bill, Dee Marie, Jay, Anne Claire. At the end of that seminar, Eric Barnow offered a closing benediction. He performed this at every single seminar he attended. Eric recounted a story about a young acolyte who insisted French filmmaker Chris Marker reveal the secrets fueling his complex editing. Marker replied, "I get lost." Grinning, Eric commanded all of us, "Now get lost."
Thank you, Patty. That was fascinating. That was lovely. Now, let's go to Scott. Scott McDonald was named an Academy Scholar by the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences in 2012. And he's the author of many books, including 5 volumes of A Critical Cinema, Interviews with Independent Filmmakers. Over to you, Scott.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody, for being here. The title of my little talk is Without Anesthesia. When I arrived at Wells College on the banks of Cayuga Lake in August of 1987, I was of two minds. I'd spent about 10 years exploring independent avant-garde film, writing about filmmakers, interviewing filmmakers, and I'd heard stories about the Flaherty Film Seminar, something I'd never heard. I didn't know anything about the Flaherty, but I heard stories about it, about how the Flaherty would chew up avant-garde filmmakers and spit them out. And I'd also seen Jonas Meekis's wonderful film Lost, 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 where Meekis and filmmaker Ken Jacobs did a kind of guerrilla attack on the Flaherty in Vermont in order to get Jack Smith's Flaming Creatures seen, and were rejected by the seminar. So I had that background, but I was at the seminar because Richard Herskowitz, who was the programmer in 1987, had asked me to be present because he was going to show Peter Watkins's film, The Journey. I don't know how well people know Peter Watkins now, but at the time he was one of the major political documentarians in the world. And he had worked 4 years on this project, focusing specifically on 2 big issues. One was an arms race that was spinning out of control, and a commercial media establishment that it did everything it could to keep anybody from being worried about this situation. The amount of news we used to get was like 12 minutes on the network evening news, and that was wrapped in all kinds of media candy with a goal simply of making us better consumers. Watkins decided to try something radical, which was to set up a network of production groups around the world, and he ended up working in 12 countries that would do research on the way in which their local institutions were playing a part in the arms race, would raise money for doing media that they would share with the other groups around the world. And the result was The Journey, which was a 14.5-hour metafilm about media and about all the issues that media deals with and doesn't deal with. The fact that Herskowitz had agreed to show the whole film, which we were very grateful for, because this was a film that was sort of all about not excerpting, was kind of amazing, because there's only a limited amount of time in a Flaherty week, and a 14.5-hour film posed some real issues for Richard, who found ways of including parts of the Flaherty during the normal hours of the week, morning, evening, morning, afternoon, evening, screening, discussion, but also had screenings late at night and at other off times when people might have wanted to be down at the dock or drinking a beer in Bill's bar. But anyway, so the Flaherty got underway and the film was shown. And I could see by Monday or Tuesday that there was some rebellion going on. People were not happy with the extended hours. They were struggling with the film, which granted required a lot of patience. But by Tuesday evening, when I went to bed, I thought, actually tomorrow night, where the discussion was scheduled for, it's going to be fun, because this was a really remarkable project, and it'll be interesting to hear what all these Flaherty media people have to say about the film. And I told myself as I went to sleep, this is going to be a blast Wednesday night. Wednesday morning, I woke up with welts all over my body. Welts. I mean, welts. I'd never had welts before. I've never had welts since, so I know these were Flaherty big group discussion welts. And these welts predicted exactly what happened that evening, and it was a disaster. It was a legendary trashing of film and filmmaker. It was brutal. I mean, I'm sure not everybody was negative. And I remember John Akumfra, who had been there showing Hansworth songs, was very supportive, but it felt like virtually everyone else just wanted to wipe Watkins and the rest of us that had shown up to represent the film off the face of the earth. And I can give you a sense of what the tone of that discussion was. That discussion was by quoting for you the final speaker, who identified herself as a former clinical psychologist. She said, "I'm not being mean when I say this. Please understand that. But watching your film was like having radical surgery with a rusty knife without anesthesia. Do you think anybody is going to watch your film?" Well, Peter, what are you going to say? What he said was, I can't really respond to your comment. And the discussion kind of ended, although for years afterward, when I would think about this discussion, I would think to myself, you should have said something. You should have responded in some way. You could have said, if you thought that what you said was not mean, I don't think you know what being mean means. Or even better, and this would have been a really good one, I think we all understand now why you're a former clinical psychologist. But I didn't say any of those things. Being a smart ass never works for me, for one thing, but also it would have just been in the tone of the discussion. So I let it go. I finished that Flaherty and I came back many times, because one of the things that Richard's programming had made clear to me was that this was an event that included filmmakers and films that I would otherwise never have a chance to see. And so I came back to the Flaherty many times. I guess I still hold a bit of a grudge about the experience of that discussion, and a grudge against those Flaherty seminarians for not having a little bit of a sense of humor about the fact that their frustration and anger and nastiness sort of was what the journey was all about, which is that you need to slow down, expand the way you think, quit using media as a kind of time prison, a temporal prison, if you're going to make any kind of serious change in the world. So that's my story. It's been sticking to me for about 35 years now. And I'll turn it back to Girish and to Portia Cobb, who I met 5 years later.
Thank you so much, Scott. Fascinating. I've read so much about the journey, but never have had a chance to see it myself. Next up, Portia. Portia Cobb is a video artist and producer of short experimental documentary whose videos and installations have been exhibited nationally and internationally. Her work investigates the politics of place and identity. Over to you, Portia.
It's an honor to be here tonight and to hear these stories, and I'm like smiling and laughing all the way through, and I hope I can do my chapter as much justice. I'm gonna kind of skip through some things. So it would be now 29 years ago, I believe, that I presented 4 videos at the 1992 Flaherty seminar at Wells College. It was my first and only Flaherty. Kind and empathetic, Marlon Riggs, the Black queer filmmaker, had recommended my work to programmers Austin Allen, Ruth Bradley, Scott McDonald, William Sloan, Jackie Shaka, and Lise Yasui. I was reading this chapter to myself and I was like, this is like a shout out to a lot of people. I had never worked with Marlon on set, but he had invited me to view a rough fine cut of Black Is, Black Ain't. I just completed graduate film school at San Francisco State University. My 14-minute essay video, No Justice, No Peace, Young Black Immediate, was shown along with 4 additional pieces. And I got to kind of test out a work in progress audio documentary performance called Points of Departure for a Diaspora Daughter. I think I presented this work just before Ken Jacobs' nervous system, and I won't even try to pronounce whatever that is, the XCXH, on and on and on. I looked at that film's erratic movement, transfixed. The images were hard to decipher. I did not realize what I was seeing. In time, almost everyone seemed as surprised as I was to realize that we had been captivated by performatively looped footage of a found pornographic film of what I remember as women masturbating. Brilliant, but I didn't think so then. I felt angry. I felt tricked into watching something offensive. When the lights came on, a lot of side eye commenced between those sharing similar feelings. Guilt, the feelings of guilt and shame by the spectators were intense. And this had intensified the experience of the film and the discussion afterward. Over the years, I came to appreciate that experience. And I've recounted that screening many times to my students, other makers, scholars, and academics. This story marks me in the experimental landscape, underscoring my own agency and belonging. At the same time, Camille Billups' Finding Krista was shown that year, co-made with James Hatch. I miss them terribly. Followed by her personal experience as a mother who had surrendered her 3-year-old daughter to an adoption agency. What I remember vividly is that we had this break where we came into an auditorium to talk about the films after they had been shown. And during that lunch break, film director Camille Billups filled a huge super soaker water gun, and she slid the gun under her chair on stage and glared at every spectator as if to say, go ahead, F with me. The film triggered responses from adoptees and foster children. One woman became very emotional, describing her other screenings during the week that had offended her and other women. Camille was criticized for lacking guilt or remorse. She had come prepared, but nothing jumped off. The super soaker remained unused. I'm going to skip down. I spent intense time with the most powerful African-American women visionaries in film and public TV, Cheryl Fabio Bradford, Mabel Haddock, and Jackie Shaka. I considered them big sister aunties. I was assigned to room with Mabel Haddock, founder of the National Black Programming Consortium, NBPC. But Mabel asked me to switch rooms so that she and Jackie Jones could be dorm mates, and I agreed. Jackie was a producer that Mabel later tapped to lead Black public media after her 2005 retirement. They were very close. I learned of Jackie's death at 52 from cancer on January 28, 2018, as I was writing this reflection. Sitting on the edge of dorm room bunks, these women smoked cigarettes like champions. A non-smoker, I suffered through their secondhand smoke. To join their wise, candid conversations about the industry, life, and creativity, it was a rite of passage. I smile remembering several pairs of women-sized undies hanging to dry in our shared small bathroom. This image evokes unpretentious, auspicious familiarity, and these women, my indie foundation and family. Between screenings, I recorded impromptu interviews with other seminarians with my Hi8 Sony camcorder. I asked subjects to define a point of departure, a concept echoing in my own journey. Folks were cooperative and a bit perplexed, and I still have that footage. Last year, I digitized the footage and spotted the young, somewhat reserved, then emerging video artist, Cheryl Dunier. Cheryl's first feature, Watermelon Woman, has entered the historical canon of film schools. Recognized by mainstream media, she currently directs episodes of Oprah Winfrey, television, Queen Sugar, and more, as we know. During the seminar, UWM was courting me. Each day, I received notes from them on a common area message board. They were negotiating my contract and arranging my move. 2 weeks after the seminar, I relocated from Oakland, California to Milwaukee and began my career as an assistant professor and director of the Community Media Project, and I'm still here. My first syllabi heavily reflected themes from that 1992 Flaherty seminar. I introduced students to work from the West Coast festivals and the Flaherty. The Midwest was puritanical compared to California's. Milwaukee's PBS station had declined to broadcast Marlon's Tongues Untied at that time. When I showed it to my class, some students refused to look at the screen or participate in discussion. Jackie Jones's death conjures thoughts of collective and individual embarkations and questions about whether one can ever return to anywhere. Departure and arrival, present and past tense together. This reflection is circular. Back then, I was in rhythm with others embarking on their own journeys, and I witnessed similar launchings in my students. That Flaherty put me among great minds, visionaries, and creative people, shaping our movement and our history. The Flaherty marked my psyche. All are the others I met there still active, healthy, and productive? Thank you.
Thank you, Portia. So many great stories and so many names from the past coming to life here. It's amazing. Next, we have Lucius. Lucius Barr specializes in promoting international distribution for films from many cultures. He's a member of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences and a former trustee of the Flaherty International Film Seminars. Over to you, Lucius.
Thank you. Well, as marketing consultant for Zacharias Kunig's Ajinarjua, The Fast Runner, I attended my first Flaherty in 2001. Elaine Charnoff and Sally Berger co-programmed that seminar, which was held at CW Post. Both of them were like family friends of the production team, and we didn't have to think twice before accepting their invitation. Elaine had programmed Isima films at the Margaret Mead Festival, and Sally, a longtime MoMA curator, had even visited Igloolik, which is about as far north of New York as Las Vegas is west. Igloolik Isima Productions was Canada's first Inuit production company, founded in 1990 by Zacharias Kunuk, Paul Apak-Agilirik, Palusi Kilititik, and Norman Cohen. Producer and cinematographer Norman Cohen represented the film, and Zach was unable to attend. Indeed, no one ever leaves Igloolik during the mild month of June. At its Cannes Festival premiere in May, the film won Camera d'Or for the best first feature in a field of 27 first features. Although it had been programmed in prime position on opening Saturday night of the festival, that placement turned out to be a liability. A day-long press junket for Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, spirited all key press and a number of interested distributors away from both morning and evening screenings. As the first Inuktitut language title ever to appear at Cannes, the film had been the subject of considerable anticipation, but came away with limited press and near zero industry word of mouth. Although winning the prize was a great boost to our spirits, closing night is always the quietest night of the festival, and everyone we had waited to talk to had already gone home by then. After Cannes, it normally takes buyers and sellers about a month to unpack and follow up on all the negotiations that had been undertaken. And by the end of June, the whole of the industry breaks away for the summer. It's nearly impossible to fire up new business proposals until the Toronto Festival in September. So we felt we were going to be sidelined for a few months until we got the call from Flaherty. At Cannes, we had closed just one sale to the Netherlands, and largely because it was a prize winner, 7 French distributors expressed interest in seeing the film after Cannes. I spent a week in Paris in those days shuttling the print from one company to another to identify 3 potential distribution partners. Our aim was to sign with a distributor who could treat the film with the respect due a major cultural monument, and at the same time, position it as an entertaining general audience picture. Atanarjuat was made by people who wanted to tell a story from their culture, mainly because no one they were seeing on national television at the time looked like them. In the late 1970s, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation Frontier coverage package for the North consisted entirely of pre-taped shows and old classic series programs like Bonanza and The Man from U.N.C.L.E. In 1981, the Inuit Broadcasting Corporation was founded to provide Northern-produced programming for children and teenagers, cooking shows, call-in shows, and mini documentaries about inspiring people of the community, but feature films were not on their agenda. One of my favorite selling points about Atanarjuat was that the story had been in development for about 4,000 years. The script was written by a team of people who began by reviewing the legend as recounted by 7 elders, and after a number of months configuring the threads of the narrative, they secured the approval of the elders before the script was finalized. Our first strategy was taking the film to market. Our first strategy in taking the film to market was to affirm its cultural authenticity. The New York Times later gave kudos to the scriptwriters who instilled in characters and situations remarkable depth of feeling. This was neither true nor accurate. The filmmakers didn't invent the story. They sought only to depict emotions that were part and parcel of the narrative that gave the legend its power. Once the film had been positioned as authentic, it remained to be seen just how much audiences would have fun watching it. We were lucky to have the Flaherty as our first test audience and focus group. Under the microscope at the seminar, we learned that the film successfully combined the monumental broad strokes of a Homerian return legend with the insouciance of a high school rival comedy. In the rush of Cannes and the private screening rooms where the film had been screened before then, no such close reading had emerged. The cherry on top of our Flaherty experience was that Jeff Lipsky and 2 colleagues from the distribution company Lot 47 joined the seminar to see the picture. Immediately after, we opened talks with them to take on what became a very successful distribution career in the States. By validating at the seminar both the social and the entertainment value of the experience, we put the film on track for as a good commodity for sale worldwide. The Flaherty provided results that we had originally expected to achieve at Cannes and set us on course for what we had only dreamed of until then. So we were very happy to have attended. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucius. A great story about a great film, Atanarjuat. Next, we have Laura. Laura U. Marks works on media art and philosophy with an intercultural focus and small footprint media. She teaches at Simon Fraser University in Vancouver, Canada, and programs experimental media for venues around the world. Over to you, Laura.
Thank you, Girish. It's so lovely to be here. Hello, dear Flaherty friends. So for years, I've been programming experimental cinema from the Arabic-speaking world. But most filmmakers from Arab countries told me they really dislike being categorized and treated as spokespeople for their region. So I promised the filmmakers that the 2015 Flaherty would give their films the most generous and thoughtful reception. They'd get high quality discussions about the aesthetics and particular qualities of their work. Their films would not be instrumentalized. I'd attended the Flaherty about 8 times, including the 1 year Portia was there. By 2014, it seemed that a discursive miasma had settled over the seminar with a Procrustean frame of identity politics and cultural sensitivity into which the audience needed the films to fit. Alarmed, I decided to design an anti-discursive program. It would be about the smart and subtle ways that filmmakers render perceptible latent presences, those aspects of the world most delicate and difficult to grasp. Looking for a suggestive yet non-committal Flaherty title that worked in both English and Arabic and would have a nice sounding English transliteration, I settled on The Scent of Places, Ater Alamakin, a title that hints at the ways cinema actualizes evanescent presences. In 2011, David Pendleton, programmer at the Harvard Film Archive, had given a talk on the responsibilities of a film programmer. David said that when programming films from other countries and cultures, it's important that the image not be used instrumentally, not as information, not as communication, but as expression. The filmmaker's aesthetic intervention, David said, ensures that these images don't turn into pure information. They don't get compressed or instrumentalized. David's words describe my attempt to de-Arabize Arab filmmakers by combining them with other filmmakers who have similar interests. After all, expression is also a method for making perfume. In my speech on the first day of the seminar, I begged attendees to open themselves to the films Francis Flaherty style without preconceptions. I requested that they refrain from talking about politics at the expense of the films. Then I let go of control and stayed in the background. I had programmed on themes, styles, moods, and feelings. For example, one program combined works with striking cinematography that all deal with being compressed in a space. In Joanna Hajituma and Khalil Jorej's film Ashes, a son returns to Beirut with his father's coffin, but without his body. The family's pressure on him, an hours-long Lebanese wake. In Tarek Tegia's The Fence, young men in Algiers on the everyday humiliation of unemployment, government repression, and nepotism. Arthur Jaffa's Dreams Are Colder Than Death, framed by shimmering, subtle cinematography, powerful speakers argue that Blackness is a force of creative resistance that cannot be assimilated. I wanted my Flaherty program to work as an affective composition that would gain in complexity over the course of the week. One respondent to the post-seminar questionnaire dismissed my program as eye candy, yet many of the attendees relaxed and submitted to this drug-like experience, trusting the movies and me. I felt like a silent priestess in some kind of opium cult. The excellent projection capacity at Colgate and the genius of projectionist Gibbs Chapman allowed the lo-fi movies in my program to really shine. We played Arnait Video Collective's Kulik from 1989, not on the original 3/4-inch pneumatic video, but on the next best analog video format, Beta SP. In an old-style igloo, Susan Avingak and Madeleine Ivalu sing about starvation and staying warm as they try to light the stone oil lamp. Finally, the Kulik lights in a string of flames too bright for the analog video camera to grasp. By seeing the piece in the original medium, the audience could feel the tense focus on that center of light and heat. David Pendleton attended the Flaherty that year, and he programmed it the next year. Dear, wise David, who died on November 6, 2017, was beloved by many, and we miss him terribly.
Indeed.
Thank you, Laura. That was a great account, and I'm struck by how different all these accounts are of time spent at the Flaherty. Next, we have Susana. Susana de Sousa Diaz has exhibited her films at international film festivals and art exhibitions worldwide. In 2012, she was guest artist at the Flaherty Film Seminar. She's part of the Fine Arts faculty at the University of Lisbon. Over to you, Susana.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. My history with Flaherty Seminar began in 2001, years before I went to the event in person. It began when I first went to the Docs Kingdom International Seminar held in Serpa, a little village in the south of Portugal. At the 2001 seminar, I learned that the primary model for Docs Kingdom was the Flaherty Film Seminar. In the following years, I continued to follow Docs Kingdom, sometimes participating as guest director and intervening in discussions around the seminar format. Always on the horizon lay the Flaherty Seminar, so close to our thinking and yet so distant. Exactly 10 years after my first visit to Serpa, I received an invitation to be a guest artist at the Flaherty. I have no words to describe the enthusiasm I felt when I realized that I would have the privilege of showing my work in a context I was sure would be highly stimulating. It was José Chocerdan, programmer of the 2012 Flaherty, who reached out and invited me to participate in Open Wounds. Writing this text some years later, I can evoke my Flaherty experience with two words: thought and community. Thought was instigated by the confrontation of visions. At the Flaherty, we see films coming together under the same general topic, but interacting and opening up, coming into dialogue, colliding or entering into consonance with one another. We confront different understandings of what documentary is. We participate in ardent and sometimes really incendiary discussions around particular films. And we take a stand, of course, not just against or in favor, not just around A or B, but regarding what goes on in the world. And maybe because of this, one of the strongest impressions I had during Open Wounds was the sense of community, vibration, strength, energy, discussion, controversy, irritations, elective affinities. All of this is part of the Flaherty. Even moments of seclusion are part of the seminar. If we want to stay in our rooms to think about what we have seen and heard, or if we want to wander reflexively through the expensive Colgate campus. I remember when someone brought a ball. It was already late at night, but I found myself playing a game reminiscent of my childhood with Sylvain Georges, John Gianvito, and some really tough guys who held out until dawn. Later, someone was looking at the picture of these events and asked incredulously, "Do you play games at Flaherty?" Yes, we play at Flaherty. We allow ourselves to be open to the now, even to the pleasurable and childlike time of a game. We intertwine in small connecting threads in a community that is constantly widening. There are people I met at the Flaherty who I've never spoke again, but I feel I can go back to them if the right situation comes along. And there are many others with whom I've maintained regular contact. From the profusion of people I met at the seminar in 2012, a few were re-encounters, such as Patty Zimmerman and Scott McDonald. Others who I met for the first time allowed me to expand my North American experience, including Katie Garrett and the much missed David Pendleton. Others I've met again recently, like Eileen Nash and Ruth Samalo. It's amazing how many Flaherty veterans I've met as I've crisscrossed countless countries and several continents during the last years. This sense of community was for me symbolically sealed on the day of the last session in 2012, when Ben Russell's energetic performance was followed by a nocturnal party where we all, dancing frantically to the sound of vibrant music and illuminated by psychedelic lightning, drank vodka from the same crystal skull, as if we were celebrating a vast eclectic brotherhood, united by the creative and transforming needs to work with moving images. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Susanna. I'm really taken by how different these accounts are, and they just run the range. They run the gamut from like passionate and combative to elating and drug-like and playful and volatile and communitarian. It's hard to imagine a single space kind of encompassing this range of experience. I wanna thank the speakers, the readers for these accounts. And I'd just like to say that soon we're gonna begin our Q&A portion where we're gonna invite people to ask questions on screen. Please raise your Zoom hand if you have questions. But before we do that, we have a surprise guest. And the surprise guest is Ruth Samalo, a Spanish curator, filmmaker, and researcher based in New York City. And she is president of the Flaherty Seminars Board of Trustees. Welcome, Ruth.
Hello, dear friends. Welcome, everybody. I would like to start by proposing a toast in continuing with the Flaherty tradition of toasting for good things that come at Flaherty. And I would like to toast for the beautiful books, Flash Flaherty Tales from a Film Seminar, the Flaherty Decades in the Cause of Independent Cinema, that Patty and Scott have cooked up for us. So join me if you have a glass in toasting for long health, also for the long health of the seminar. So cheers. And I would like to also to let you know a little bit that contrary to what it might happen or appear based on its impact, the Flaherty is a very tiny organization. It often feels like it's put together with like bubble gum and paper clips. It is run by a tiny but mighty staff of 3 people right now and built on the decades of work of trustees, occasional interns, and seminar volunteers. A lot of them are in these little windows around you right now. For us on the board, it is an honor to steward an organization that grows and evolves and self-reflects on its practices. And we're really very proud to continue to re-examine our values and strategies while keeping Frances Flaherty's vision alive, that of a shared critical film space where we arrive with no preconceptions and where I personally have met some of my favorite people in the world. Some of you are already here in the room. So the Flaherty, as you know, embraces a non-hierarchical approach for participants, curators, and artists to share different points of view and opinions, words and all. And I think Flash Flaherty, as all good oral history does, reflects that very well. So if you're curious and would like to experience all of that cinematic magic with a pinch of experiential turmoil, I invite you to participate in our next iteration of the Flaherty Seminar. This year is entitled Opacity, and it will take place from July 9th to the 18th, and it will be a synchronous virtual program that will be available worldwide through a beautiful dedicated portal. It is programmed by the brilliant Brazilian curator, Janaína Oliveira, and her program will bring us the opportunity to dig deeper into the philosophical, political, and aesthetic aspects of uncertainty, fragmentation, and opacity. So free of geographic constraints, the new iteration of the seminar will be as eye-opening, rigorous, and fun as our other Flahertys, minus the not so great coffee for those of you that have been there, and the uncomfortable bunk beds. So instead of having to travel to upstate New York, you can be at home with your dog like me, or with your best friend or mommy, and just connect with all of us worldwide. So you can sign up and register right now at the link just posted in the chat. Thank you so very much, Patty and Scott, for your invitation and for all of you to share your beautiful stories at the Flaherty. And thank you for the Park Center for Independent Media for co-sponsoring the events. And see you at the Flaherty.
Thank you, Ruth. That sounds exciting. And a shout out to the wonderful Janaina. I'm sure the program is going to be brilliant this year. Now, I'd like to turn it over to Scott and Patty for a couple of minutes to say a few words, and then we'll move to the Q&A portion of the event.
There are some people that need to be thanked for their help with the book. And then there are also people that need to be thanked for their help with this event. Julia Tulke was so valuable to us in getting through. We were dealing with 100 writers, 100 essays, a complex publication process. I don't know, we would have killed each other if we didn't have Julia working with us. So it's just been wonderful to have her around. It's not often that you have somebody that can contribute that generously and that well to a process like this. She was absolutely crucial. And we also want to thank Steve Montgomery, who was like our agent. One of the things we had to do is find people who were willing to tell their stories, willing to work with us on the editing, et cetera, et cetera. And Steve was fantastic in making connection with people for us, bringing people into the process. And the book would be far less interesting and far less fun to read, I think, without his input. So Steve and Julia, thank you so much for your participation in Flash Flaherty. We love it.
I want to echo my thanks to Julia and Steve. This project, this book would not have existed without either of you. So, you know, I was thinking about how appropriate it is that our book is launching on Zoom, because back in 1955, Francis Flaherty insisted no one be called a spectator or an audience, that they'd be called a participant. And here we are, 66 years later on Zoom. And if you look at the list, everyone is a participant on Zoom. So I believe Francis Flaherty wrote the algorithms for Zoom. So we have some more thank yous for the event tonight to the Park Center for Independent Media and the Flaherty Seminar for co-hosting this international event. We would not have these audiences and this gathering of people without you. We are so grateful that you two and your two organizations could meet, because you are both central features of the independent media landscape internationally. And I hope this is a partnership we can continue. We want to deeply thank Robbie Aceto. Robbie is a well-known composer, and he's been involved in the festival I work on for many years. And he wrote the music that's over the opening and closing PowerPoint. And I gave it a title of the Flash Flaherty theme. The music includes violin and piano. And of course, Robert Flaherty played violin and Francis played piano. And it captures the epic, turbulent nature of the Flaherty. We'd like to thank Raza Rumi for all of his work on mounting this. We'd like to thank Raza's staff, Jeremy Lovett and Hannah Brooks, who are working away in our chat, giving you all the links that you need. From the Flaherty Seminar, we'd like to thank Sari Horowitz, who also did quite a lot of research for us on both of the books we've done on the Flaherty. She's our secret weapon in the archive. We'd like to thank Mary Ellen Peltzer, the interim director of the Flaherty. And we'd like to thank Ruth Samalo for that beautiful toast and for her incredible collegiality in mounting this. Now, all of these kind of events on Zoom have all kinds of people working behind the scenes to make it run smoothly. And I'd really like to thank our producing team, Phil Wild, Ari Kiseloff, and Annie Michelle for really keeping this so elegant and so beautiful. And I do need to note that Phil Wild and Annie Michelle have about 4 decades experience at the Flaherty, and they did all the tech work and helped the Flaherty move from analog old school film to video to new media. So there's no better place for them to end up than on Zoom. I'd like to thank Girish Shambhu, a good friend of the Finger Lakes Environmental Film Festival and one of the greatest moderators any authors could ask for at any book launch. Your brilliance combined with your elegance leaves us in awe. And finally, we want to thank all of you, all of these participants who are here for coming. We are honored that you took the time to listen. We're honored that you're here in this Zoom space with us. And we'd also like to note that so many of our participants are contributors to Flash Flaherty. And we are so glad that you are here with us tonight. And we are so grateful for your eloquent and searing and controversial and gutsy essays in Flash Flaherty. So thank you, everybody.
Congratulations and to you, Patty and Scott. This is a wonderful book and a great event. So happy to be part of this. Now, perhaps we could do a Q&A. And if you have questions, if you could please digitally raise your Zoom hand, and I could call on you, and you could come on camera to ask the questions. Any questions? Amelie Rothschild, if you could please ask your question.
You're muted, Amelie.
Can't hear you.
All right, unmute. First, I think it's great to have another book, and Scott and Patty have been amazing in pulling this off. My question really is more to Ruth, out of curiosity of how you're going to organize a virtual Flaherty, and how many hours a day are we going to be Zooming, watching films and discussing them? How's that going to be organized? Because I'm in Italy, by the way. So it's like, I don't know, what is it? 2 a.m. my time. And I'm not going to be able to be back in the United States. I haven't been to a Flaherty since 1981, but I went to 10 of them between 1970 to 81. I missed 1980 when I could have met Patty for the first time, damn. But I was finishing editing my Willard Van Dyke film. And I was also 5 years a trustee back then. And I'm curious, actually, in relation to the selections for tonight, that none of them go back. I mean, I know there's still people who attended Flaherty in the 50s and 60s who are still alive and with us. And the 70s were very crucial for the flowering of the social documentary film. And the Flaherty has definitely morphed into a much broader mix of films and filmmakers. But the idea that I might be able to actually attend the Flaherty this year from Italy, in spite of the 6-hour time difference, how's it going to be organized? Because that's going to be quite a feat. And I assume that we still, I mean, I assume that it will be paid. I mean, we have to pay.
So you can
maybe not the $600 or $700 or $1,000, whatever it is when we're in person and have to be put up and fed, etc. But how is it going to work?
So you can see in the chat, Sari just posted the daily sessions. We've tried to accommodate times so we could have the West Coast, the East Coast, Europe, and Latin America watching films synchronously together. So Eastern time, well, you're interested in Europe time. So the first
Well, it's
session
not
would
the time
be,
so much, it's how many hours. I mean, New Day Films did our annual meeting virtually last year for the first time. We had 12 hours of time differences from Hawaii to Italy, actually 13 hours to Israel for the meeting. And we met for 7 hours a day. I mean, that was with like 100 people.
so I don't want to capitalize this lovely Q&A with the great people that are talking about the seminar. You can email us and we'll give you all the information you need. But just so you know, there will be 2 sessions of films a day followed by conversation. So between 5 and 6 hours of programming a day. And you can see the time schedules and time zones in the chat. But please email me or email us at the Flaherty and I'll be happy to give you a call and explain everything you need to know. Thank you so much for your service too as a trustee.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Other questions that people may have for this fascinating panel and this great tradition.
Waiting for people to come up with questions is so unlike a Flaherty seminar. It's like weird.
Yeah, and Linda Lilienfeld is in the house. I cannot believe that she hasn't stood up and said something.
Linda.
Go, Linda.
Yeah, there's a question, Lisa.
Yes.
Hi, everybody. It is so nice to see you all. I am so happy about this book. I am so happy to have this reunion. And I'm really curious about the process of Scott and Patty, the 2 of you working together. How did you conceive of the project? How long did it take? What was your back and forth as you moved through collecting all of these wonderful essays?
Well, I'll start just because it's Patty who instigated the second book, because Patty is a blogger. And after the first book came out, it was clear that many people had stories to tell who weren't represented in the book. And so Patty made a Flaherty Stories blog, which is what got the whole process started. And at the point when we realized these stories don't seem to be stopping, that this was going to become a book. And from that point on, we got a little more serious in what we were doing and realized, okay, you can't have a book that's 40 pages long. It has to be a real book. And so we then started to put the word out to get enough stories to make the thing work. Patty, you can tell them the process.
Yeah, the process. So I'm going to reveal the truth here is that it took 10 years to do the first book. And in answer to Amelie, it is, I interviewed 65 people for that first book. And that was like being in the middle of a family feud, everybody arguing with everybody. Oh, you talked to this person, no, they're wrong. And then checking it against the documents. So that had many people from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And Scott in that book worked on transcriptions of key discussions. And so that book is an institutional and organizational history. And those of you who know us as scholars, we're very dedicated to the idea that not only Warner Brothers and HBO should have histories, but we believe the nonprofit international media arts sector should have histories. So that was more institutional and more public. So the book came out, and now I'm going to reveal it all. We were at a Flaherty seminar, and we felt like moving targets. People were coming up to us and saying, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. And I remember being there and people emailing me and texting me and saying, you know, it's not the whole story. You know, like you screwed up. You don't know how to do history. And so my idea was, of course, my training is history is never complete. If history is totalized, it's fascism. So you never want it to be totalized. You want it to be an open system. So I just said, Scott, let's do a blog, and if everybody thinks they have a story to tell, let's put it there. And it was really like, people would say, I have a story to tell. So we started just doing it actually to keep people happy. And then Scott is the person who said, this is a book. And I want to share one thing, one aspect of this is that we both have a background in literature. So we realized that this was a different kind of writing than scholarly writing. It was more flash nonfiction, short lyrical pieces. So everything was edited back and forth with myself and Scott. Our idea for this was very inspired by Svetlana Alexievich, the Belarusian radical journalist who talks to people and does stories that are polyphonic. And I have to give a shout out to my friend Soraya Khan, who is here, who took me to a reading of Svetlana Alexievich at Cornell. And I sent Scott the book, and this was kind of a talisman for us and a way forward, because history, in our view, is never a straight line. It's never linear. It's filled with contradictions. And we really believe in this idea of polyphony, of many voices, and they're not all going to be the same. So there was a lot of back and forth. It was extremely pleasurable to work with the writers and to also work with Scott.
One thing I would add to this is that we finally had a sort of working method. I mean, it may seem you get stories from people, and some people are more effective writers than others. And the question was, how do we shape this into a book? And we came up with this sort of formalist idea of saying, okay, the piece has to be about 1,000 words. And we decided to do 1,000 word pieces. Patty would get the first run at what was sent in. She'd make general suggestions about where else a piece might go, or what might be an additional important thing to explore. And then I would get the next wave and try to work these stories into readable, fun explorations of this larger history. I mean, I knew from transcribing and editing the Flaherty seminar discussions that I did for the first book, that there's a lot of work in making something speak comfortably, easily, and hopefully we were successful in that. But it was a pleasure to have two people working on the process. That was really important, all the way through to the proofreading. To have two people doing it, not just one, was great. So it was a fun collaboration.
Was a fun thing. I just remembered something else I wanted to just share with people is, you know, there's history and there's memory. And in this book, they often did not align. So we had to do quite a lot of hardcore historiographic research to make sure we had, people were saying it was this year and it wasn't when we coordinated with what the titles were, or they were saying, I saw this film and then we checked and that film wasn't shown there. We had to get the right dates on films. And I see a lot of film historians out there, and this is really difficult to do because you have to figure out which date do you use, the date it's finished, the date it shows, theatrically, the date it's in a festival. I mean, we could talk for 2 hours and I won't. And then we had to get the correct title. A lot of independent media, the titles change. I'm looking at my smiling, wonderful friend, Laura. You know, titles get translated in different ways and you have to try to unify that. But I have to say, Scott and I are historians, tried and true, and we love this. It's really fun. And for those of you who would like the People magazine behind the book story, we never fight about anything. It's just really fun and joyful to do this work.
Well, I mean, it's also a little bit like a family reunion. I mean, I see Lisa Barbash there. I see Laura. These are people that in my normal life I don't see anymore. And doing these pieces and collaborating this way was really a fun way to be in touch with people.
Thank you. So next we're going to have a question from Jay Lists, and then after that a question from Robert Cargy Mitchell. So Jay Lists, if you could please ask your question.
Yes, thank you for this. This was absolutely wonderful. I went to Flaherty at Wells College for many years, loved it, loved it, loved it. And it was always really wonderful seeing the different people, looking at the different films. And I learned a lot. So I did it for many years when I would go from when I was in Los Angeles, I would go. I even went when I moved to the East Coast, I went too. But one of the things that I'm wondering about, I have a question and it's related to the next one that's coming up, but also to what you guys know. I don't remember ever having to send in a picture to participate in the Flaherty. I just don't remember that. And I was getting ready to register for the one that's coming up, and it said, submit a photo. And submitting photos for admission to things has a lot of bad history for many of us. And, you know, I just think about how you couldn't go to, once they saw your picture and you were not white, you weren't able to attend. And those things die hard. They really do die hard, you know, that and names. So I'm just wondering, was it ever like that before? And any idea why that's there now?
This is the first time, I think.
It's the first time.
Any idea why it's there now?
No.
Okay, thank you.
I think it has to do with this situation. Everything is Zoom now, and we know people's faces. You know, I just think it's, you know, they might as well have a picture.
I remember you very well, Scott.
Yeah, and I just would like to direct people to the chat. Ruth Samalo, the president of the board, says only send a picture if you are comfortable with it, and just to help people connect.
Okay, thank you. And thank you so much for the book. I'm really looking forward to getting one.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Next, Robert Cargie Mitchell, if you could please ask your question. Robert. Yeah, maybe.
Girish, he wrote it in the chat. If you can scroll up, I think you could find it.
Oh, yeah. So the question is from Robert.
Oh, there we go.
Thank you all for your contributions and great stories. My question is to the order of themes, films, and curators and how they are selected.
You want to start, Scott, and I'll piggyback on you?
Sure. That changes with I actually don't know anymore how the process works. I mean, it used to be the board would decide who programmed, and a lot of thought went into it, but Patty, you're probably better at answering this one than me.
Yeah, I'm going to answer it historically. First of all, I'm going to take each of those words, themes, films, and curators, and historicize them a little bit. The Flaherty did not start using themes until 1995. It never had a theme. It started using themes because of two reasons. It was having, like many nonprofit independent media organizations, was having enormous financial problems, and it needed a way to brand and market because it does not reveal the names of the filmmakers. Secondly, it was what I would call was a historical shift that many people were involved in the seminar from the museum and global art world, where putting an exhibition together in a museum always has a theme. So that is actually very recent in the seminar's history. About curators, it is only in the it's really only in the 21st century that there's been a shift to calling Flaherty, the people who put the Flaherty forward, a curator. Again, in our first book, we analyzed this. Always, the Flaherty tradition was they were a programmer. There are a lot of people who are programmers out there, and you know, there's quite a politics around whether you're a programmer or a curator. Programmer is often seen as very egalitarian, as you're programming not just films and new media, but you're also programming audiences. curator is identified with more connoisseurship. That is recent in the realm of the Flaherty seminar. And again, my analysis from looking at the historical record and doing other historical research is that was a shift we see in independent media culture to like legitimate it and market as different from commercial industrial culture. And then about films, the Flaherty never has just shown films. It's more formats, films, video, installation, new media, social media, and some of the most exciting seminars are the ones that are multi-platformed. And some of that multi-platforming goes back to the 60s with people doing like happenings, at the Flaherty seminar. So it's, all of these terms, themes, films, and curators, and how they are selected is a part of history where there's historical change happening. All organizations are dynamic and they're responding to internal debates and controversies, as well as responding to social historical context. And I might also add funding. The early days of the seminar in the 50s were on a farm, and it was a lot of Flaherty films and a lot of who lives on the East Coast, show up, show your movie, right? And it was like what I would call, there's this corridor between New York City, Vermont, and Montreal, National Film Board, and that was kind of baked into the seminar for many decades.
Thanks, Patty. I'll just say that I expected to get that answer from Scott because I think I've asked him before. But that's, and I expected also to get some pushback on the terms that I use. But since having been at the Flaherty, in recent years, say, those, excuse me, my teaching voice is going. Those were the terms that sprung to head or to forward in terms of in recent times. So that's a really good answer. I'm really pleased by that. I know I prefer programmer myself. I've never really been too comfortable with the idea of curator because generally what I put out there is for an audience, not for a program or necessarily a theme or a funder. So thank you for answering my question.
Thank you. I noticed that Ariella Palke has a question in the chat. Ariella, would you like to ask in camera, or I'm also happy to read your.
Sure, I can.
Okay, please do. Please do.
The stories that everybody shared from the book, and I would. The question was so that I could see Linda speak, and I'd love for you to share if you can anything, and if you can think of the most controversial moment, experience, or discussion from any of the Flahertys that you've participated in.
Do I have to unmute myself? Am I unmuted?
Oh, you're there. You're there.
I am there. One of the most, what? When we had sex or we were doing drugs? What was the question? When we couldn't find each other's underwear? When I was telling politically incorrect jokes and being yelled at by 25-year-olds because I was telling my mother's Jewish jokes? Listen, this is such a ridiculously wonderful experience, but I have a real question, which is, how do you make a Zoom like a real Flaherty? And I wrote to Alberto, I guess, I think it would be amazing if we could all send suggestions about, because I do Zooms and I try to have personality on them and it sucks. People do not really like it because everyone's paying attention to everyone's words. But you watch TMZ and everyone's screaming on top of everybody else. How can we as Flaherty members who've had in real life the experience of like mashing up with each other to somehow find a way to mash up with each other in the Flaherty in July. And I wrote to somebody the idea that we all send in suggestions from Zooms that we have all spent our year doing of what might be the most electrifying way to break the wall that we're all looking at 24/7 for the past year, because we know how to do it, because we have done it, which is why we're all here tonight and why that book is so wonderful. Because this Flaherty, I told Tom, it really captures the feeling of it. It's the personal nature of the essays, the personal reflections of everybody, the curating of the selections. I'm so touched by it because I miss it so badly. It so empowered me with my work and in my life and in my thinking. It really made me sad. And I also think something else. I think technology, smartphones, have really limited how we are at the real Flaherty. I feel like ever since smartphones came in, we used to stand on a line to make a phone call at the pay phone booth at Wells. We had to be with each other. So I thought, wouldn't it be amazing if at the next in real life Flaherty, that none of us used our smartphones. They had to stay in the room. People would have fucking nervous breakdowns. But I really want to suggest it because I think the intimacy that we established as a family, that we experience to this day, the friendships that we have made, the love that we feel, the intensity with which we experienced and shared the films, has been mitigated by our constantly checking our phones or feeling the buzz or feeling obligated. We were so present. We had sex, we had drugs, we had laughs, we had games, and we had films, and we had Patty Zimmerman, and we had Scott, and we had brilliant conversations. I miss it all terribly, and I love you all, and I appreciate you giving me, everyone mutes me, so I don't talk at all on Zooms. I am muted constantly. It's everyone's joy. They see me, they mute me. So I thank you for letting me talk, and I love you and miss you, and congratulations on a great book. I love you all. And now I'll mute myself. Goodbye.
Thank you so much, Linda. I can't think of a better note, more passionate note on which to bring this event to a close and thank everyone. Thank Patty and Scott. But I'd like to ask everyone to please stay for a brief little Zoom after party for about 15-20 minutes. So I want to thank Patty and Scott and the entire production team for this great event. Thank you. And for the book.
Thanks for being here, everybody.
Soundtrack is great. It just it immediately puts me into a kind of film watching mood. Who's the composer?
Oh, I don't know. He might still be here.
Robbie is.
Robbie, are you here? Put your camera on. It's Robbie Aceto. He is a very well-known composer. He lives here in Ithaca. He's a very good friend. He's been involved in our festival for about 15 years. And he scores movies, all kinds of movies. He also is very well known. He's a member of Cloud Chamber Orchestra. And as a member of that, we hired them and commissioned them. They create scores that are soundscapes for silent films that we show in our festival. And because we have great producers in Annie and Phil and Yulia and Ari Kisilov, they don't let any detail go unnoticed. And they said, we need some music.
Detail
So-
I'd like to bring up right now.
Yeah.
This is Bill's Bar, the after party for this event. And please put your cameras on so that we can see you and say hello and miss you as much as we already do.
Well, some people don't have the bandwidth to stand it. It knocks my computer out.
Well, then just talk. That's good.
Mhm.
It was so good to see all these faces. I feel like I'm at a Dratfield brunch or I'm at the Flaherty again. It's been too long.
Yes, we should all be in person, but that isn't possible. So this is nice.
And I just want to say in reply to what you say in the book, Linda, we love you, we love you, we love you back.
I should
Linda,
say,
it's not a Flaherty without you, Linda. Come on.
That's right.
You can unmute yourself again. It's
And
okay.
we've got-
Okay,
Here
I'm
comes.
unmuted. Yeah,
Stand
but if I
back.
get unmuted, then
Stand
nobody's
back.
allowed to talk still.
And Juan, so
I
good
can
to,
mute you. I have control.
so good to see you, Juan. It's wonderful.
Juan,
Yes.
Richard,
Richard, yes.
Steve, Vincent.
It's really Vincent. I saw Vincent. It's really, I'm overwhelmed by the whole experience.
Yeah.
It's really.
And
I mean,
Malin is
what
up
a-
late. Everybody, sorry, go ahead.
Phil, the photo behind your head is just too much.
Do you like the doc? I found the doc.
I'm ready
I
to
found my
jump
picture of
in.
the doc.
I'm ready
Yes.
to have sex. It's the
That's